Before we dive into the different ethno-linguistic groups in the Philippines, aren't you wondering how we they formed? Let's go back to the good old days. Imagine a huge empty canvas that's like the Philippines thousands of years ago. The story of how different Filipino ethnic groups came to be is a fascinating tale of movements, settlements, and mixing, both shaped by the land and the sea. The very first people who came to the Philippines were the Negritos. They are now known by the name Eta, Ati, Batak, Mamanwa, and Maga. They came to the Philippines thousands of years ago, around 30,000 to 50,000 years ago, when the islands were still connected to mainland Asia by land bridges during the Ice Age. They lived as hunters and gatherers, which means they survived by hunting wild animals, gathering fruits, roots, and plants. They were family nomadics. When we say nomadic, they lived from place to place to find food and lived in small groups. Since they were scattered across many islands and lived in different environments, they developed their own language and culture. In short, the Negritos were the very first layer of diversity in the Philippines. Thousands of years later, another big group of people arrived, the Austronesians. They came from Taiwan about 4,000 years ago, traveling in large wooden boats called bulangay. They were expert sailors and farmers, and they slowly spread throughout the Philippines. Unlike the Negritos, they brought some new skills, like farming, pottery, and weaving. When they settled into the islands, they mixed with some Negritos to end their marriage. But in some cases, they pushed them into more remote mountains and forests. Over time, the Austronesians became the main ancestors of most Filipinos today, forming groups we now call as Tagalog, Visayan, Ilocano, Bicolano, Kapampangan, and many more. To simply put it, the Negritos were the very first Filipino, or people, rather, who came to the Philippines, while the Austronesians later arrived skilled farmers and sailors from Taiwan who became the main ancestors of most Filipino today. Luzon, the largest island in the Philippines, is a home or a rich tapestry of ethno-linguistic groups that reflect the country's deep cultural diversity. As a political and economic center of the nation, Luzon hosts both indigenous and lowland groups whose traditions, languages, beliefs have shaped the island's unique identity. The major ethno-linguistic groups include Tagalog, Ilocano, Bicolano, Pangasinense, Kapampangan, and Mindanao, who primarily occupy the lowland and coastal areas. Meanwhile, the Igorot, Ifugao, Kalinga, and Eta peoples inhabit the highlands and mountains regions of northern Luzon, preserving their ancestral customs and ways of life. Each group possesses distinct dialects, artistic expressions, and social practices that contribute to the Luzon's vibrant cultural landscape. Despite modernization and the growing influence of urbanization, these ethno-linguistic communities continue to uphold their traditions and identities, serving as living symbols of the Philippines' rich cultural heritage. Now, let's go to the lowland ethno-linguistic groups of the Philippines. At the southern tip of Luzon lies the Bicol region, home of the Bicolanos. Their land includes Camarines Sur, Camarines Norte, Albay, Sorsogon, and Catanduanes. Most Bicolanos trace their roots to Malay settlers, later mixing with Tagalog and Visayan migrants. Bicol is called Bicol likely because of the shape of the land, because if you look at the map, it kind of has a pointy tip. Later explorers and locals noticed the shape and started calling Bicol as Bicol, which may have meant pointed end or 2 points. The pointed tip of the Bicol Peninsula is at the southeastern end of Luzon in Sorsogon province. The Bicolanos speak different Bicol languages. influenced by both Tagalog and Visayan. Their homeland is famous for Mayon volcanoes, perfect cone, and for being often hit by typhoon, shaping a culture that learned to survive and thrive between mountains, rivers, and seas. They lived on rice, root crops, and coconuts, the staples of their farming. Bicolanos practice animism. When we say animism, they believe that all living and non-living things have soul, so they most likely respect all living and non-living things. Villages were led by chieftains, they called datos and elders, with societies based on clans and shared rituals. They were skilled in abaca weaving, pottery, and brewing tuba or rice wine. Bicolanos are also known for their hand-woven abaca textiles and their folk dances such as the binanog and bamboo dances. Festivals celebrate farming cycles, and most famously, the Virgin of Peña Francia. The Virgin of Peña Francia refers to a Filipino Marian devotion centered on an image of the Virgin Mary, also known as Ina or Mother. She is the principal patroness of Bicolandia and is enshrined in the minor basilica of Our Lady of Peña Francia in Naga City, Camarines Sur, Philippines. The devotion is known for its healing miracles and a large annual feast held in September, which involves a river procession called fluvial procession. Community life was tied together by rituals and stories, especially the famous epic Ibalong. They Belong or Kadyong is a 60-stanza fragment of the Bicolano full-length folk epic of the Bicol region of the Philippines. Based on the Indian Hindu epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, the epic is said to have been narrated in the verse form by a native bard called Kadunong, rather. The Spanish-built towns introduced Christianity and spread devotion of the Virgin of Peña Francia, which remains the biggest religious festival in Bicol. Old beliefs didn't completely vanish. They mixed with Catholic practices, creating a unique local faith. Spanish rule also reshaped land holding and promoted tobacco farming, changing how people worked and lived. Now the Americans came. The Americans added public schools and roads, further opening Bicol to modern influences, which threatening the use of both English and Bicol languages. Bicolanos are best known for their spicy dishes. When we think of Bicol, what comes to our mind? It is what? Yes, it is Bicol Express and Gaeng. Now, if you think about Bicol Express and Gaeng, they have common ingredient, which is coconut milk. Traditional dress included the barot saya for women and camisa de china for men, though modern clothes are now common. There are now over 4 million Bicolanos. Most are Catholic, but many are also reviving interest in pre-Hispanic stories and traditions. They work in farming, fishing, and tourism, but continue to face challenges like poverty and typhoons. But still, Bicolanos are proud of their resilience, rich culture, and fiery spirit, so much that they fondly called their region Bicolandia, and even nicknamed themselves after their famous dish, the Bicol Express. Now, let's talk about the Gadang. The Gadang are an indigenous group of people from northeastern Luzon. Their name is thought to come from the words Ga, which means heat, and Dang, which is burn, likely because they practice slash and burn farming. When we say slash and burn farming, it is a traditional agricultural practice of clearing land by cutting down vegetation and burning them to make way for crops. They originally lived in the forested hills of eastern Nueva Vizcaya, reaching into parts of western Cagayan and eastern mountain province. Many later moved down to lowland towns like Dupas, but some highland communities still keep older traditions alive. The Gadang lived in small riverside villages, surviving through farming, hunting, and trading. They cleared forest patches to plant rice and root crops, which is slash and burn farming, hunted wild game, and traded products like rattan and risen for salt, beads, and tools. Unlike in many other groups, social respect was earned not inherited. It came through bravery in battle or leading rituals. Women mainly farmed, while men hunted and sometimes joined in head hunting raids. Head hunting is like what its name suggests. You They made pottery, wore tattoos, and dressed simple women in woven skirts and men in loincloths or malams, often decorated with beads or metal. Their belief system revolved around nature spirits and ancestral worship. Ancestral worship, or veneration of the dead, involves ritual and belief that honor deceased family members and are based on the idea that their spirits continue to influence the lives of the living. Now, the Spanish came. The Spanish had difficulty reaching the highlands. Those in lowlands generally converted to Christianity, adopting Ilocano or Ibanag speech. The Americans later built roads and schools, but many highland Gadang remained isolated and poor for a long time. Gadang culture is kept alive through festivals like Mapaluyong or rice harvest and Gambang. Food reflects their close ties to nature: rice porridge, sour soups, wild tubers, and hunted meat. Music and storytelling were central. They used flutes, xylophones, and string instruments, while Tomenses is their village storytellers, preserve tales and history through oral tradition. The Gadang are a small population, often bilingual, in Ilocano or Ibanag alongside their own language. Schools and scholars continue working to protect Gadang language and heritage, despite ongoing struggles with poverty and loss of ancestral land. Now, here comes the Ibanag. The Ibanag are one of the native peoples of the Cagayan Valley in northern Luzon. Their name means river, a reflection of how closely their lives were tied to the Cagayan Valley and its many streams, or Cagayan River rather. They traditionally lived in the lower valley, in what are now Cagayan Valley, Isabela, and parts of Nueva Vizcaya. Before the Spanish came in the late 15th, they were already experts, rice farmers, planting in flooded fields, but also fishing, hunting, trading with neighboring groups. Today, after heavy Ilocano migration, Ibanag speakers make up only about 15 to 20% of the population in towns like Tuguegarao, Reina Mercedes, and Lalo. Life before colonization were organized around villages led by dati. The Ibanag were farmers, warriors, and craftsmen. They wove goats, forged swords, and honored spirits that they call anito, through rituals led by spiritual leaders or priestess. Society had ranks. On top were the chiefs, and freemen were above the commoners. Commoners are the normal people. But even captives could sometimes change their status. Culture was preserved through epic chants, riddles, proverbs, and songs often performed with instruments like the kuribao, tulali, and the kulinta. Now, the Spanish kings. When the Spaniards arrived in 1581, they quickly built missions and introduced Christianity. Old practices like head hunting, weaving, and gold working began to decline. Spanish priests learned and documented the Ibanag language, but during the American period, English and Tagalog spread in schools, which weakened native traditions further. Even so, so many customs survive today. The Ibanag still celebrates with music and dance, using kuribao and kulintang. Their food is distinct. The binunge. Binunge is a sticky rice cooked in bamboo. And tamilok, which I'm going to show a video of the person eating tamilok. It is a woodworm delicacy. And yes, it is eaten raw. Families continue to pass down songs, riddles, and proverbs, and Catholic fiestas remain central to community life. There are about 500,000 Ibanag speakers today, though most are also fluent in Tagalog, English, or Ilocano. The language is also considered at risk because young people prefer other tongues This is also one of the effects of mainstream system that is taught in school, whereas only Filipino and English are primarily taught in school. That's why the youth slowly forget their own language. But still, cultural advocates are working hard, recording oral stories, producing books, and teaching weaving, music, and folklore in schools. Despite challenges, the Ibanag still remain proud of their heritage, keeping alive their traditions while adapting to the present. Now, here comes the Ilocanos. The Ilocanos are the third largest ethno-linguistic group in the Philippines, native of the coastal plains of northwest Luzon, historically known as the Ilocos region, which today includes the provinces of Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur, La Union, and Northern Abra. They speak Ilocano, an Austronesian language related to the northern Luzon tongues. Ilocanos are known for their long history of migration, having moved to southern Luzon, Mindanao, and even Hawaii as laborers in the early 20th century. Today, approximately 10 million people speak Ilocano as their first language. In pre-colonial times, Ilocano society was clan-based and agrarian, with landless workers farming under village chiefs. They constructed simple irrigation terraces for rice and also cultivated tobacco and cotton. While warriors existed, head hunting was rare compared to upland groups. Religious life was centered on animist worship of nature spirits that they call anito, with the baylans acting as spiritual meditators and rice rituals which as pagayuyan were important for harvest. Traditional clothing include huanti-like breech cloths or imat loincloths for men and tapis skirts with alampay shawls for women, while pottery, wood carving, and mat weaving were common crafts. They revered Bathala as the high god along with other local deities. During the Spanish and American colonial periods, the Ilocanos were among the first Filipinos pacified in Spain, with Juan de Salcedo establishing Spanish control in 1572 and the city of Vigan founded by 1582. Spanish colonization introduced Christianity, strengthened the local principalia through alliances, and implemented the encomienda land system. If you're wondering what encomienda system was like the Spanish government giving the Spanish people, or they called encomendero, the right to take taxes or buwis from local villagers. In return, the Spaniard was supposed to protect the villagers and teach them Christianity. But often it just meant the locals had to give a lot of their crops, work on farm, and do other chores for the Spanish, which could be very hard. Notable revolts included Diego Silang's rebellion in the 1760s. Diego Silang was an Ilocano leader in the 1760s who, with help promised by the British, led the revolt to free Ilocos from Spanish abuse. But he was betrayed and assassinated by Miguel Vicos, who pretended to be his friend, and his wife Gabriela Silang continued the fight after him. Ilocano priests played a key role in preserving the language and literature, including the translations of Catechism. Now, the American came. Under American rule, Ilocano became the lingua franca of northern Luzon, and many Ilocanos embraced American education and migrated abroad, particularly to Hawaii. Culturally, the Ilocanos are recognized for their abel weaving, Burnay pottery, folk dances such as Tinaktisan and Dinsa, often accompanied by the Gangsa Gong ensemble. Festivals like Hawaii Festival and the Longanisa Festival in Pagudpud highlight local traditions, while foods such as bagnet, pinakbet, dinengting, and tupig remain popular. The epic Biag ni Lamang, if you're familiar with Biag ni Lamang or the life of Lamang, continues to be performed in barangays, reflecting a rich oral tradition. But to give you an overview of the Biag ni Lamang, Biag ni Lamang is a famous Ilocano epic and one of the oldest recorded Philippine epics. It tells the story of Lamang, a hero born with extraordinary abilities, even speaking right after birth. Wow. From the start, Lamang shows bravery, intelligence, and strength, which are valued traits in Ilocano culture. Now here comes their traditional attire. Their traditional attire includes barot saya for women and camiso de chino with striped pants for men, and music remains lively with folk songs and dialect poetry used for courtship. In modern times, Ilocanos are well represented in politics, business, and media, with the Ilocano language remaining the third most spoken language in the Philippines. Strong family traditions persist from the Spanish era, and migrant communities thrive abroad, particularly in North America. Ilocanos are known for their thrift and industriousness, and efforts to preserve their culture to continue through a bell-withing and the revival of Ilocano literature. While education and media locally maintain the Ilocano language, Tagalog and English dominate at the national level, reflecting a balance between cultural preservation and integration into the broader Philippine society. Now here comes the Lumot. The Lumot, also known as Bugalot or Ibilao, are indigenous group living in the highlands of Nueva Vizcaya province. They mainly live in mountain areas of Dupax and Bambang, along the Sierra Madre foothills. A long time ago, they were very isolated and had little contact with outsiders. In 1883, a German described them as forest people who moved freely through the mountains. Their land, including upper parts of the Cagayan River, an area filled with thick slopes or thick forests and sloping farms. Before the Spanish came, the Lulots practiced kaingin or slash and burn farming. They cleared small parts of the forest to plant crops such as rice, corn, cassava, and sugarcane. After farming for about 5 years, they would let the land rest for several more years before using it again. They also hunted wild animals, often using dogs, and gathered honey and wild roots from the forest. In their society, everyone was considered equal. There were no kings, no chiefs, but others who were wise and knowledgeable were respected. Because they lived in very remote mountains, the Ilots had little contact with the Spanish during the colonial period. In 1910, an American officer described them as people who moved from place to place and were known for being fierce warriors. In 19s, they became known for killing Dr. William Jones, an American anthropologist, during his field study. In 1908, under Horace Binet Worcester, the American government began trying to make contact with them. By 1909, about 150 Ilots had started visiting mission stations. Over time, education and Christianity began to spread among them. In 1950s, Protestant missionaries came and introduced evangelical Christianity, which many Ilots later accepted since they had no earlier religion similar to Christianity. All tradition like headhunting were banned, and the last known cases ended by the mid-90s. The Ilots value teamwork and community spirit, similar to the Filipino bayanihan. They had special celebrations like the Pagaypo, a feast marking the end of headhunting and mourning. During these events, they made offerings to spirits as a form of respect. They were also skilled in making rattan hammocks, bows, and other tools. Their clothing was simple. Men wore dark blue or black cloths, while women wore skirts made of similar cloth and didn't wear tops traditionally. They sometimes wore red or black armbands. Today, only a few thousand Ilots remain, and most of them live in government-supported villages. They are now mostly Christians, but some still believe in spirits and use amulets. They face modern challenges like poverty, logging, and loss of their culture. However, there are ongoing efforts to preserve and revive their traditions. Many Ilocano descendants are recording old songs, teaching traditional weaving and protecting their forest. The old practices of headhunting is no longer done. It is now symbolic and remembered through festivals like the Pagidayaw in Nueva Vizcaya, which honors their ancestors. Today, Ilocano stories, art, and songs, many studied by Filipino anthropologists like Renato Rosaldo, continue to remind people of their rich and unique cultural heritage. Now, Data West. Data West, also known as Itawet, are a small indigenous community found in the central part of the Cagayan Valley. They traditionally lived along the Chico and Matalag rivers and in southern municipalities of Cagayan province, such as Enrile, Iguig, Tuwao, Peñablanca, and Tuguegarao. Their language, Itawes, is closely related to Ibanag, and many Itawes people today can speak both languages. The total numbers of Itawes speakers is estimated to be in the tens of thousands, although exact numbers are not known. For music, they played bamboo flutes and guitars, and it was said that some used human hairs as guitar strings. Their folk songs and chants were dedicated to ancestors and heroes. One famous song, Maguriay I Mapuray, means the brave lead, the lenient follow. Many of their stories and songs were passed down through generations. When the Spanish missionaries arrived in 1572, the Itoes resisted at first, but were later pacified. The Spanish introduced Catholicism, and by the 16th, most of the Itoes were already baptized as Catholics. According to their oral history, they initially resisted conversion but eventually embraced the new faith. Today, almost all Itoes are Catholic. It is common for every household to have a santo, placed on a home altar. During the American period, the Itoes gained access to education and public schools, which helped them become part of the wider Filipino society. The Itoes share many cultural traits with the Banag, but they also have their own unique traditions. A famous Itoes folk story is Biwag at Magana, which is the life of Magana, an epic love story near Iluro, Rizal, Cagayan. Their folk dances include the Anafunan, a reconciliation dance where a man sings to a woman. The Kiling-Kingan, a lively dance using coconut wood castanets and guitar music. And the Jota Cagayana, a local version of the Japanese Jota. Their food is similar to that of other Cagayan communities, often made with rice, corn, and fish such as tilapia and catfish from the rivers. The Itoes also celebrate Catholic feast days, especially the Fiesta of Our Lady of Piat, which is an important pilgrimage event in the region. Local researchers are now working to document their traditions, such as recording the dances and retelling the stories of Biwag at Magana. Their church plays, fiestas, and annual town celebrations remain strong symbols of their cultural identity. While some young people are moving to the cities, the Itoes people continue to show their pride in their heritage by preserving their traditional dances, songs, and religious celebrations that make their community unique. Now let's move on to Daybatan. Daybatan people live in the Batanes Islands, the northernmost province of the Philippines, located between Luzon and Taiwan. Only the islands of Batan, Sabtang, and Itbayat, along a small settlement on Ivos, are permanently inhabited. Daybatans have long adapted to their harsh maritime climate, enduring frequent typhoons and strong winds throughout the year. Their environment has only two main seasons, Rayun, which is dry, and Namian, which is windy. The ancestry of the Ivatans is still debated, as they share genetic and language similarities with both northern Luzon groups and the Yami or Tao people of Taiwan, but their Austronesian language is distinct. According to legend and linguistic evidence, Ivatan seafarers likely settled Batanes from mainland Luzon or nearby islands, and historical records from the Ming Dynasty suggest that they traded with China even before Spanish colonization. Spain officially annexed Batanes on June 26, 1783, making it part of the Spanish colony. Before this, the Ivatans lived freely with little outside rule. After annexation, Dominican missionaries converted them into Catholicism and introduced new building styles. With Spanish guidance, the Ivatans began constructing their well-known stone houses, which I'm going to show a video after this. Lumipas ng kadiliman ng araw, dahan-dahan pang gumigising, which have thick walls and steep cogon roofs that can withstand even the strongest typhoons. Spanish rule also brought new churches, such as the Baptistry of Ivana, built in 1787, the oldest in Batanes. Under American rule, the Ivatans were introduced to formal education and local self-government. During World War II, Japanese troops occupied the Batanes, but the Ivatan people remained united and resilient. Today, the Ivatans are a small but close-knit group numbering around 15,000 based on earlier records. They primarily speak the Ivatan language. There are small differences between the dialects in each islands. particularly Itbayat. Many also speak Tagalog and English. Tourism has helped promote their unique culture, especially their woven bakot headgear, buri baskets, and stone houses, which attract tourists from all over the world. Before the Spanish arrived, the Kapampangans were the skilled farmers who planted rice, cotton, and tobacco. They lived in large, organized villages led by chiefs called Lakan or Raha. They built big wooden boats called barangay for trade along the rivers. They were good at pottery and weaving, and their society had different social classes. The dato or leaders, the maginoo or free people, and the liping na mamahay or the servants. Women had many rights. They could own property and even ask for separation, which was rare back then. The Kapampangas believed in ancestral and nature spirits called Diwata, and they had healers or shamans called Babaylan who led rituals. When the Spaniards came in 1571, Pampanga was one of the first provinces they took control of. The Spanish government used the area for tribute collection, farming, and spreading Christianity. Some Kapampangans rebelled, but many leaders cooperated and became part of the local elite. Under both Spanish and American rule, Pampanga remained a prosperous area and an agricultural center. Kapampangas became active in politics and education. Two Philippine presidents, Justa de Macapagal and Corazon Aquino, were Kapampangas. Most Kapampangans today are Roman Catholic, but some of their older traditions are still practiced. Kapampangan culture is famous for its food, and Pampanga is often called as the culinary central of the Philippines. Dishes like sisig, kare-kare, morcon, and tibok-tibok are originally from there. Festivals like the Manyaman Festival and the Giant Lantern Festival in San Fernando show how Kapampangans value creativity and community. Their traditional crafts include wood carving, pottery, blacksmithing, and lantern making. Women used to wear the colorful barot saya, while folk dances like ulot were performed were performed during local celebrations. Today, many parts of Pampanga have become urbanized, especially around the Clark Freeport zone. The Kapampangan language is still spoken by many, but young people also use Tagalog and English. Some groups are working to preserve the Kapampangan language and culture through schools and art programs. Despite challenges brought by modernization and migration, Kapampangans remain proud of their heritage. Their love for good food, their colorful festivals, and their history of leadership continue to show their creativity and resilience as a people. Now, let's go to the Pangasinense. The Pangasinense people live in the province of Pangasinan in north-central Luzon, along the coast of Lingayen Gulf. The word Pangasinan means place where the salt is made, which refers to their early salt-making activities near coastal lagoons. One of their famous figures is Princess Urduja, a legendary warrior and ruler known for her bravery and wisdom. Their way of life was filled with music, poetry, and dances that reflected daily activities and emotions. For example, Inuman was a courtship dance, Tagam was a war dance, and Kumakaret was a dance showing skill and balance. They played traditional instruments like the lali flute. Their religion involves worship of nature and sea spirits, led by a priestess called Amiteras. They offered food and prayers to the gods, especially during the Pistay Dayat, or Feast of the Sea, to ensure safety and a good catch. There are now over 2 million Pangasinenses. Most speak Pangasinan along with Tagalog and Ilocano. Many have moved to cities like Manila or even abroad, but they still remain proud of their roots. Their festivals such as Pistay Layag or Feast of the Both celebrate their seafaring history and local pride. The story of Princess Urduja remains an important part of their identity, symbolizing strength and leadership. Pangasinan people are known for being religious, hospitable, and proud of their history, a pride that even national hero Jose Rizal admired for his courage and loyalty to the homeland. Now, the Sambal.
The Zambal people, also known as Zambal, are native inhabitants of Zambales province on Luzon's western coast and nearby areas of Pangasinan such as Buginaw and Anda. The term Sambal was a Spanish adaptation of their local name. They used to speak the Sambalic languages, like Botolan Sambal and Buginaw dialects, and lived in mountainous areas of Zambales. Before colonization, they practiced farming in the uplands, hunted in forests, and gathered foods from nature. They traded goods along the rivers and the coast. There were already few written records about the Sambal before the Spaniards came. They were known as brave warriors and good hunters. Their religion centered around nature and spirit worships, and they believed that spirits lived in the mountains and the sea. Like other mountain tribes, they may have practiced rituals and traditions that involved head hunting, which is part of their belief system about bravery and honor. They also made banig mats and simple tools, and bartered goods with other nearby groups. Others remember old traditions like tattoos and wearing beadwork. Crafts such as weaving and bamboo both making are still practiced in some areas. However, most of their old stories and beliefs have disappeared or been replaced by those of their Tagalog and Ilocano neighbors. Today, only a small number of Sambal people remain, and now many speak Tagalog or Ilocano instead of their native language. Their dialects are in danger of disappearing. Cultural groups in Zambales are now trying to preserve what's left of Zambal heritage by organizing community events and recognizing their ancestral lands. Although much of their old way of life is gone, the Zambal continue to be part of the diverse culture of Zambales and Pangasinan. Remember the strong, resilient people tied to both the mountains and the sea. When the Spaniards took over in the 16th, they made Zambales part of their colonial system. The Zambal people were forced to move into mission towns where they were converted to Christianity. Over time, they became part into the larger colonial population. Later, under the American period, the Subic Bay area in the Zambales became a major U.S. naval base. The Zambales population mixed with migrants from different parts of the Philippines, and their traditional language and customs slowly faded. Even so, some traces of Zambal culture still remain. Certain villages still celebrate local festivals with traditional dances and songs in Zambal languages. Their diet remains simple, mostly rice, fish, yams, and coconuts. And now, I'm down to the last lowland ethno-linguistic group that I'm going to discuss, which is the Tagalog. The Tagalogs are the largest group in Luzon, living mostly in the southern part of the island, which includes Manila, Rizal, Laguna, Batangas, Cavite, Quezon, and Bulacan. The word Tagalog simply means people of the river, since many of their early communities were built along the river banks. During the Spanish contact in 1571, Tagalog territories include powerful kingdoms like Tondo and Maynila, which were trading centers connected to Muslim and Chinese merchants. Today, there are around 14 million Tagalog speakers, and their language became the basis of the Filipino national language. Before colonization, the Tagalogs lived in organized communities led by chiefs called Datu. They grew rice, traded with other islands, and used metal tools and Chinese ceramics. Their religion honored a supreme god called Bathala, and other deities like Mayari and Gakapati. They believed in ancestral spirits and practiced rituals for good harvest and protection. They also used baybayin, an ancient writing system for poems and letters. Tagalogs were known for their gold jewelry, tattoos, and oral traditions like songs and stories told by village poets. The traditional women's clothing was the barot saya, while men wore camisa de chino with trousers. Their folk dances include tinikling and magalatik, and their music includes love songs called kundiman and riddles called bugtong. When the Spaniards arrived in 1571, they established Manila and Tagalog land. The Tagalogs quickly became Christianized and played a major role in the spread of Spanish culture. The first book ever printed in the Philippines, the Doctrina Christiana in 1593, was written in Tagalog. Over the years, Tagalog led several uprisings against Spain and later played key roles in the fight for independence. During the American era, Tagalog became the foundation for the national language, Filipino. Tagalog culture today is rich in tradition and festivals. Flores de Mayo and Simbang Gabi are important Catholic events celebrated across Tagalog provinces, even today. There are also unique festivals like Pahillas in Quezon, where people decorate their homes with rice and fruits, and the Moriones Festival in Marinduque, which reenacts the story of Roman soldier. Famous Tagalog foods include adobo, caldereta, pancit palabok, and kakanin, which is rice cakes. Today, Tagalogs make up the majority of the population in Luzon, and their language dominates television, government, and schools. While Tagalog culture is now closely tied to the Filipino national identity, many still take pride in their regional roots. Some groups are working to preserve old Tagalog customs such as baybayin script and traditional songs. Even with modernization and the rise of English and Filipino, Tagalog values, literature, festivals continue to thrive, showing how deeply their culture remains a part of everyday Filipino life.